When it comes to drawing anime characters, there are some fundamental concepts to understand between establishing feminine and masculine qualities. And in today's tutorial, we will be looking at how to incorporate a few ideas and tricks in order to establish these variations that could distinguish female characters from male characters. With that being said, hey guys, welcome to another video by artincontext.org, where we explore various art-related topics. And in today's tutorial, we will be breaking down the process of how to draw both male and female characters through the incorporation of a few simple tips and tricks. So with that being said, let's get into it. Now, when it comes to drawing female characters, anime can be drawn in various styles. And once you understand the basic drawing process, you can then tweak and change your character to suit your particular style or interests. So anime characters are really simple to draw. So with the female character, the idea is that we want to first start by shaping the face. So we want to start by creating a basic shape, and we can do this by drawing a circle and adding a sharp jawline beneath the circle. Keeping the jawline sharp and small is also just a very useful way to kind of feminize the actual shape of the face. So this already is a very useful way to already give the quality and the shape of the face a more feminine touch. The next thing we can do is we can start by drawing the eyes. So once we have the general shape of the face, working on the eyes first is a great way to kind of start with the general features. So there are many ways to draw the eyes, but making them slightly larger is another little way to kind of give the quality of the anime character a more feminine quality. So most times in anime, the eyes for females tend to be slightly larger, and this is just a good way to kind of give the eyes a more feminine touch. However, obviously there are many ways to obviously play around with how you give the qualities of your anime character a feminine aesthetic, but in this case we're kind of working with some simple ideas in terms of how to establish a feminine quality, and then from there you can obviously play around. So from there, a good suggestion would be to start with the eyelashes. Anime eyelashes tend to be quite dark, so like a dark lining along the upper and lower areas of the eyelids. In the case of a female anime character, we can make these features slightly darker and thicker. So we can also make the eyelashes slightly elongated and extend outward from the eyes. There is a little difference between the male and female characters with the eyelashes, and this is just another way to kind of feminize the actual eyes of your female anime character. So the eyes will have pupils, but again, we want to make sure that they are slightly large. At this point, we can also play around with the positioning of the eyebrows. So eyebrows are also quite simple in shape. However, you can play around with positioning to suggest different expressions on the face. When you fill in the pupils, you can also leave some moments of negative space, as this will give the impression of reflection in the eye, and it is a unique feature of anime style. So we can also add shading along the upper eyelid to suggest a shadowing in the eye. Some anime eyes are very detailed and others are not so much. It is more a matter of preference and how far you'd like to lean towards the more realistic side of anime drawing. So that's merely a matter of preference. But in this case, we're working with a more simplistic chibi style of anime. And in that case, working with these larger eyes are a great way to kind of have a generalized idea of feminine quality. So once again, just with the eyebrows, you can explore different eyes and eyebrow shapes to see how facial expressions can change. But once we have kind of established the eyes, we're going to move on to drawing the nose and mouth. Now again, because of this very chibi style, this very innocent looking kind of animation or anime style of representing a female quality, we are dealing with a very specific set of feature types. Again, you can look at variations on the internet of different female characters, and then from there you can kind of use this as a framework to then readjust. But the idea of having a slightly thinner jaw, smaller features in terms of mouth and nose, maybe slightly larger eyes, elongated eyebrows, these general concepts can be applied to different anime character drawings. And even if you are going the more realistic anime representation of characters, it's still a good framework to kind of use. But otherwise, when it comes to drawing the nose and mouth, another way to kind of give it a feminine quality is by making the nose more subtle and having less of a ridge. A ridge tends to be associated with a lot of male characters in anime, or if you start to go again the more realistic routes, these rules can change slightly, but having a more subtle ridge of the nose is another way to give a more feminine quality to the actual nose, so having a more button-like feature. And we can also make the upper lip slightly more voluptuous by giving it more volume and curvature. So the upper lip having slightly more volume to it is another way to kind of give your character a more feminine quality. Now, perhaps one of the most iconic aspects of anime characters in terms of being a contextualizing feature for male and female characters is the hair. So the best way to start with the hair for an anime character drawing is by drawing in the hairline. So drawing the hairline is going to establish the structure of the hair and where it will be placed or start along the forehead. So from here you have the freedom to explore variation of hairstyles to see how they complement the character, and this is where you can really play around with different hairstyles and how they form along the face. You can also play around with bob haircuts, fringes, bangs. There really is a lot of fun in terms of the freedom of hairstyles and how that can give your character a more edgy quality or a generalized feminine quality, but you can play around with hairstyles, and this can be a great way to contextualize the character. We also want to make sure that as we draw the hair along the top of the head, we move towards the back of the head. So it sits a little bit above the skull, and this is a common mistake. People try to draw hair on the actual skull, but you want to have hair kind of shifting slightly above the skull because it kind of represents more volume and how hair actually grows out of the head in this upward direction. So this is a more realistic and accurate representation of hair and how it forms on the head in terms of volume. But again, playing around with different hairstyles is going to affect the character and how they ultimately look in terms of their overall aesthetic. From there, it's a matter of preference and playing around, but you want to make sure that you also work in some line work. So some detailing that we can give to the hair is kind of working strategically with negative space and line work in order to establish some sense of textural difference, some idea of kind of working with a light source. We can play around with negative space, and this just gives the hair a shine quality and ultimately gives it a little bit more of an interesting nuance to your anime character. But otherwise, we can also play around with, then once we have established all the general details, tweaking those features, and at this point we have the basic features established within the anime character drawing. So from here you can play around with the proportions and scale of different features, and lastly, adding in some contextualizing features. We can begin to basically add in some shading to emphasize some of the features. So this is just a step further that can enhance the character. It's not necessarily important as much as the aforementioned steps and tips in terms of giving your character these very essential details, but this is just another way to kind of give your drawing a little bit more three-dimensionality and just kind of interact with a light source and can enhance the features. So it's a really good idea to consider adding in some general shading, and this is where we can draw in the neck, and that can be slightly darker. The neck can also be slightly thinner. That's another way to kind of give your character a feminine quality. But otherwise, guys, this is the general idea of how to draw a feminine or a female anime character. There are a lot of androgynous qualities between male and female characters, and but it is useful to understand how to draw particularly feminine or female qualities to have a distinction between a male and a female character, because this just provides you with a lot more freedom and control over your character's aesthetics and ultimately how they look in terms of having more feminine or masculine qualities. Obviously, there are a lot of androgynous aspects to anime characters. That is a common occurring theme, but sometimes if you would like to intentionally make a female male character, it's nice to know how to do so, and this just provides you with a general idea, which brings us to the next part of this tutorial, and that is how to draw a male anime character. So we can also start by shaping the face. So we start with the same process of forming the face by drawing a circle and adding a jawline beneath the circle. This time we can make the jawline slightly longer and elongated, as this will give more a masculine touch to your anime character. We can also have these different guidelines to establish the areas in which the different facial features will be drawn. But once again, as we shape the face, we can also start to give the face a little bit more of a square-like shape to emphasize a more masculine type jaw. Now, as we proceed to drawing the various facial features, we will start by the eyes once again, and this time we're going to give them a slightly smaller and thinner shape. So this is already another way to kind of emphasize a more masculine type quality, and we can do this by first establishing their basic shape in this kind of hexagonal shape. So from there we can slightly erase the basic shape of the eye and then start adding a little bit more of a refined eye shape by drawing the eyelashes to form the eye. With a male figure, we don't necessarily need to accentuate the eyelashes too much, which is just another aspect of giving a more masculine touch to our anime character. We can also start playing around with the eyebrow, and this is where the eyebrow formation again will really emphasize the expression on the face, but the idea is that we can play around with how high or low we would like them to be near the eye. Once we have the eyebrows in place, we can start working on the features of the eyes. So by drawing the pupils and iris, again, we want to make sure that they are not necessarily too large for this particular character, and also that they fall behind the upper eyelid. So naturally with eyelids, the idea is to kind of allow them to slightly cut the iris in half, or the features in half, and this is kind of representing a more realistic way in terms of how the upper eyelid rests over the eyeball, and the features within the eyeball are not necessarily completely visible unless we're drawing a character with really wide open eyes. In this case, we're drawing a more like angry type of expression on the character, and this way it's a good exercise to understand how to represent that quality of resting eyelids. Now, as you fill in the pupils, make sure that you leave some negative space in the eye to suggest highlights. So this gives the eye a little bit more life and provides an interesting characteristic to the anime character drawing, and it's just a more realistic representation of how the eye tends to reflect light off of its surface. Now we're going to move on to actually drawing the nose and mouth. So with the nose, we can make the length slightly longer and the nostrils slightly wider. So there are various ways to draw the nose, but these are subtle changes between the female nose and the male nose that make a massive difference in this idea of representing feminine and masculine qualities. Now with the male lip, we can basically draw a slit that will establish the mouth area. However, this time we don't necessarily need to draw an accentuated upper lip like that of the female character, but just another way of keeping the anime character more masculine is keeping the lips really subtle without necessarily voluptuous qualities. So with the nose, we also want to make sure that the ridge is also quite strong by adding some shading along one side to emphasize its shape. This isn't necessarily the case for all anime characters, but this is just another way to kind of give a strong nose quality to our actual anime character. The last thing we can do is we can use some shading for shaping features. So we can extend the shading of the nose basically into the upper eyelids and beneath the eyebrows to suggest a little bit more shadowing cast by a protruding feature. Again, this particular way of working with shading is just a way to enhance features in this particular way. It's just a way to enhance features. So obviously with the female character, we looked at some general ideas of emphasizing feminine qualities without the use of shading. But in this case, we're kind of seeing how shading can be used to emphasize certain features. So obviously these are transferable to your female characters. But again, characters in anime or anime characters in general tend to be quite androgynous. And the idea is that you just want to understand how these various ways of drawing or these drawing techniques can be used for different characters to emphasize different ideas, or necessarily not used to still represent characters in a feminine or masculine way. So we want to basically use the shading along the nose to emphasize the ridge of the nose, and that can kind of shift into the upper eyelid area or the eyebrow area to emphasize some protrusion in the face. We want to use shading as a means of basically defining the features a little more, emphasizing them a little further, especially near the nose and mouth. Shadowing is what will give the nose and mouth a little bit more structure. And then lastly, we're going to work with drawing the hair. So again, the best way to draw the hair is to first establish the hairline, and you can play around with how you would like the hairline of your character to look. So this will have a significant effect on their overall aesthetic. Obviously with a more dense hairline, it suggests more youth. With a receding hairline, it could also maybe represent an older character. But once you have established the hairline of the character, you can then start to imagine different hairstyles using the hairline as a starting point. From there, you can play around with the different hairstyles and see what will suit the character's overall aesthetic. When drawing disheveled anime hair, you want to keep the lines basically spiky and kind of zigzaggy. So if you are going on the more realistic territory or kind of veering more that direction, your hair shapes tend to be a little bit more realistic in terms of single strands of hair. But in the case of a little bit more of an animation kind of quality to the hair, you can keep it kind of vague and generalized in terms of its hairstyle. We can also play around with the crown or the partitions in the hair. This is basically another important aspect to bear in mind for creating realistic hair qualities. And we also want to make sure that the hair flows a little little above the actual skull, once again to suggest volume and actual growth from the skull and not necessarily flat on top of the head. You also want to consider if the hair flows behind the ears and flops onto the forehead. Hair is always going to be an emphasized or a quality that emphasizes the nature and the characteristic of your character. It can be very defining of their feature and their overall look, so it's really important to consider how the hair flows alongside the face or out of the face and so on. So once you have the hair structure drawn, you can then start to fill in the hair. However, once again, you want to consider leaving out some negative space to suggest highlight qualities within the hair to give your anime character a little bit more of an interesting nuanced quality to their hairstyle. By creating moments of highlights in the hair, we do give more layer and depth as well into the hair, so this just gives the hair a little bit more of a realistic quality and looks better anyways. And then lastly, we can play around with drawing contextualizing features. So once we have the main features of the character drawn, we can then start to draw in maybe some other features such as the neck and shoulders. For male characters, we can make the neck slightly thicker. You can also make the shoulders slightly broader, and then how you clothe your character will be up to you at this point. But for now, we're just looking at facial differences between feminine and masculine qualities and how to represent them within your anime characters and how to utilize them strategically. But again, all of these processes are interchangeable between different characters. Obviously, there's a lot of androgynous nature within anime and how the features are represented. But these are some general ideas, tips, and tricks in terms of how to establish a little bit more of a canonical idea of masculine and feminine characteristics within your anime drawing. But otherwise, guys, that is it for today. I hope this video was helpful. Make sure that you remember some important tips and tricks. So the first thing is make sure that the anime drawing outline is first established. Then you do want to make sure you take your time with the eyes. The eyes are really essential. From there, you also want to make sure you are using shading to enhance features or not using shading to basically establish a different aesthetic. Again, shading will have a different effects on your character, so it depends on the visual quality or the type of anime character you're trying to draw. We also want to establish the hairline on the forehead, not necessarily on top of the skull, for a more realistic representation of hair. And then lastly, just experiment with your anime drawings and play around with these different features in terms of crossing the barriers of androgynous qualities to create more unique representations of male and female characters. But otherwise, guys, thanks again. If you did like this video, please comment down below if you're interested in similar or related topics. You can also show us some love by liking and subscribing. That helps us to grow the channel, which ultimately enables us to make more art related content for you guys, which we love to do. So please do comment, please do like, please do subscribe. Thanks again. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, cheers.